Every morning starts the same way. I wake up at 5:30 like clockwork, 77 years old, and the habit of getting up with the roosters hasn't changed. Not that there are any roosters in Springfield. The last rooster I saw alive was probably when I was a kid, when my father took me to my grandmother's house in Earlton. I, Wilfred Parkhurst, a former building inspector, have lived in this town all my life. 35 years I've given to the municipality. 35 years making sure that every structure in Springfield was up to code and didn't fall down on the residents' heads. When I started, it was a different town, smaller, cozier. We knew our neighbors by name, said hello on the streets. Now half the houses on my street are occupied by people I only see when they drive their SUVs out of their garages. My one-story house with a small porch and a small garden behind is all I have left after Elizabeth, my wife, died. She passed away 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The doctor said it was fast. They didn't say it would be agonizing. After retirement, the day is filled with routine. Morning coffee, reading the newspaper, which I still subscribe to, even though everyone has moved on to those iPads of theirs. Then work in the garden. Then lunch, afternoon nap, and evening in front of the TV. That's the weekdays. But there are 2 days a week that I look forward to in particular. Tuesday and Saturday are the days when Elliot, my grandson, comes to see me. Elliot is 6. He has Elizabeth's eyes, gray with green speckles, and her same unruly brown hair. He looks like my son Noah when he was little, but Noah was never so quiet and thoughtful. Sometimes I think Elizabeth's soul has moved into this boy. Grandpa, do bugs feel pain? Elliot asks, turning over a beetle he found in the garden. Probably, but in their own way, I answer. We don't know what it's like to be a beetle. Then you can't crush them, he concludes seriously, and gently drops the insect into the grass. Elliot has a strange habit of silence for a 6-year-old. He can sit with his book or draw for hours without saying a word. It's not that he's unsociable, it's just that he's comfortable in silence. So am I. We understand each other without words. Noah, my son, brings Elliot over on Tuesdays after work and sometimes stops by for tea. He's a design engineer for a construction company, makes good money. Tall like me when I was young, but with his mother's soft features and her same tendency to avoid conflict. After Elizabeth died, our relationship became strained. Not all at once. Gradually, quietly, like a disease that develops slowly but inevitably. He married Rowan 4 years ago, a year after we met. I wasn't thrilled, but I kept my opinion to myself. Elliot was born a year after they were married. "Oh, Dad, we're doing well," Noah says when I ask about his life. "Work is going great. The new project is almost complete. How's Rowan? How's Elliot?" "He's fine. He's fine." He always says that. Fine. But I can see him avoiding my gaze, tapping his fingers nervously on his knee. For 35 years, I've been testing buildings for strength. I know what cracks in a foundation look like. Rowan almost never comes to see me. She has things to do, Noah explains. What business a woman who quit her job as a receptionist at a beauty salon right after her wedding might have is a mystery to me. I saw her last Christmas. She wasn't happy with the gift I'd bought Elliot, a kit for the young naturalist. What does he need all those jars and nets for? Just to bring dirt into the house, she said, not even trying to hide her annoyance. It's good for children to study nature, I replied. Let him study it at your place. Elliot sat quietly, holding the box in his lap, not daring to open it. I could see his little fingers clenching on the wrapping when his mother had spoken so harshly about the gift. He was used to not showing his feelings, too used to it for a 6-year-old. That day was also the first time I noticed something else. A bruise on Elliot's arm, just above his wrist. It was small, almost imperceptible, but clearly from the fingers of an adult. When I asked him where the bruise came from, the boy remained silent, and Rowan quickly said, "He fell in the playground, clumsy, just like his father." Noah remained silent, his eyes downcast. After that incident, I watched my grandson and his mother more closely. Rowan often forgets to pick Elliot up from school. Sometimes the teacher, Ms. Prim, calls me and asks me to pick up her grandson because no one has come to pick him up. Rowan attributes it to traffic or errands, but I've seen her Instagram, pictures of her with her friends at a coffee shop at the time she's supposed to pick up her son. Last month, when I brought Elliot home after he was forgotten at school, I saw him enter the house cautiously, as if afraid to disturb anyone. Rowan was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, not even looking at her son. "Oh, Wilfred, thanks for driving him. I've been so busy today." "It's okay," I said, though I wanted to say something else. Elliot slipped quietly into his room. On the coat rack in the hallway hung a man's jacket that was definitely not Noah's. Noah was at a conference in Portland that day, I knew for sure. That night I started keeping a journal, writing down dates, times, and oddities in Rowan's behavior. Occasions when she forgot about her son. Moments when I saw marks on Elliot's body, not outright beatings. Rowan's not that stupid. Just marks of careless, rough handling. A hand grab too hard, a jolt that makes a child fall and hit the furniture. One time I saw her pull his hair when she thought I wasn't looking. The diary pages were filling up. I started taking pictures on my old cell phone of Elliot's bruises, writing down his quiet, disconnected stories about how his mom yells at him, how she locks him in his room when her friends come over. I tried to talk to Noah, but he always turned the conversation to another topic. "Rowan's just going through a rough patch, Dad. She's coping the best she can." Protects her, always defending her, like it's his duty to justify her behavior. In my office, in a desk drawer, a file folder grows. Dates, notes, photos, names of witnesses, Elliot's teacher. The neighbor who saw Rowan leave the boy alone in her car in a supermarket parking lot for 40 minutes on a hot day. My old friend Hector Price, who used to work for Child Protective Services and is now retired but still has connections. "You need evidence of systematic neglect, Mr. Parkhurst," Hector told me. "Single incidents can be explained by fatigue, oversight. You need a system, and preferably an extreme case, something that can't be ignored or excused." I wait, gathering evidence, and praying that this extreme case doesn't cause irreparable harm to Elliot. It's Tuesday evening. Elliot is sitting at the table in the kitchen, drawing something in his sketchbook. I'm making dinner. Nothing fancy, just macaroni and cheese, his favorite meal. In an hour, Noah will take him home. The boy has been silent for about 20 minutes, concentrating on his drawing. "What are you drawing, buddy?" "A house," he answers without looking up. "Our house or yours?" "A house where no one screams." I didn't know what to say. I just put my hand on his shoulder and gave it a little squeeze. He continued drawing, adding more and more details to the image of a house that exists only in his imagination. A home that is safe. A home he doesn't have. I have to do something, and I will. The only question is when. My son Noah has always been a gentle man. As a child, he cried when I killed flies in the kitchen. Once he spent a week feeding a wounded crow he found in the garden. Elizabeth said he had too much heart and too little backbone. She loved him immensely, but worried that the world would be cruel to such a soft-hearted man. He'd been teased at school. Not a lot, but enough to make him come home with his shoulders slumped. I tried to teach him to fight back. Elizabeth said I shouldn't turn him into someone he isn't. "Noah is special, Wilfred," she said. "There's too much rudeness in the world already. At least let someone stay kind." I guess she was right. Noah had grown up kind, but that kindness made him vulnerable. We were close when he was a kid. I took him to inspections, showed him how structures worked, taught him how to read blueprints. Maybe that's why he chose engineering. When he went to university, I was proud of him. When he got his first job at Brighton Engineering, I felt I'd done something right in this life. And then Rowan came along. I remember the day he first brought her into our home. Elizabeth was still alive, but she was already sick. Rowan brought flowers, too bright and fragrant for a sick woman. She talked too loud and laughed too much. All her attention was on Noah, not us. She seemed energetic, Elizabeth said after they left. It was diplomatic. Elizabeth was always diplomatic. I was more direct. She's a predator, and Noah is her prey. My wife gently chided me for being harsh, but didn't argue. She saw it too, the grip with which Rowan held Noah's hand, the authority with which she directed the conversation. But Elizabeth thought we should trust our son's choice. Noah adored Rowan. She was lively and vibrant, full of an energy he lacked. She dragged him to parties, camping trips, concerts. She expanded his world, and he looked at her with the adoration of a puppy who'd gotten his long-awaited attention. Elizabeth died 3 months before their wedding. She spent her last weeks at home, under hospice care. Noah came every day. Rowan, twice the entire time. She's allergic to the smell of medication, Noah excused her. At the funeral, Rowan was dressed too brightly for such an event. She held Noah's hand and whispered something in his ear, causing him to smile inappropriately a few times. I couldn't bring myself to look at them. After the wedding, Noah started coming less often, first once a week, then once every 2 weeks. When I called, Rowan often answered, saying he was busy or in the shower or something. I started calling his work phone. "Dad, it's okay, it's just a lot of work," he explained. "A new project, you know." I understood, but I could also see him changing. Shirts he would never have picked out himself. A new haircut, too trendy for his round, soft face. A habit of looking at his watch while talking to me, as if his time was strictly limited. When Rowan got pregnant, I hoped it would bring us closer together. I imagined teaching my grandson or granddaughter everything I knew, how we would work together in the garden, go fishing. Noah was excited but anxious. "I'm not sure I'm ready, Dad," he confessed to me one day over a beer. It was one of the rare times the two of us sat alone in a bar, without Rowan. "It's such a responsibility." "You'll get through it, son. You're going to be a great dad." I believed it. Noah's kindness, his patience and gentleness all had to make him a great parent. Rowan was having a hard time getting pregnant. At least that's what Noah said. She wasn't working by then, but she complained constantly of fatigue and malaise. Noah did everything for her, cooking, cleaning, running around for groceries and fancy snacks she suddenly wanted in the middle of the night. Elliot was born in October, on a rainy Tuesday. I remember standing at the hospital room window, holding a tiny bundle in my arms. Elliot was so small, with a fluff of brown hair and surprised gray eyes. He looked at me as if he recognized me. "He has Elizabeth's eyes," I said to Noah. Rowan, who was lying on the bed, snorted. "All newborns have gray eyes, Wilfred. Then they change." But Elliot's eyes didn't change. They stayed exactly the same as my Elizabeth's. The first few months with the baby were difficult for the young family. Noah took time off work to help Rowan, but she still complained that he didn't understand what she was going through. She hired a nanny when Elliot was only 3 months old, even though she wasn't working herself. "I need time to myself, Noah," I heard her say. "I can't be a mother 24 hours a day. I'd go crazy." Noah agreed. Noah always agreed. When Elliot was a year old, I first noticed how Rowan was treating him. We were at their house for a baby shower dinner. Elliot, who had just started walking, waddled across the room, grabbing onto furniture. He reached for a vase on a low table and it fell, shattering. No big deal, just a cheap decorative vase. Rowan's reaction was disproportionate. She grabbed Elliot's arm so sharply that he lost his balance and flopped to the floor. "What did I tell you?" she hissed. "Don't touch anything." Elliot cried, but quietly, as if he was afraid of causing more irritation. Noah rushed to him, lifting him into his arms. "Rowan, he doesn't understand yet," he said softly. "Then keep him away from my things." She snapped at him and left the room. I saw Noah cradle his son in his arms, whispering consolations to him. His eyes met mine, a mixture of embarrassment and helplessness. There have been many such moments since then. Overreactions to childish antics, irritation at a child's normal behavior, disregard for his basic needs. And it's always the same scenario. Rowan snapping, Noah trying to smooth things over, Elliot shutting down. I tried talking to my son several times. The last time was a month ago. We were sitting on the porch of my house. Elliot was asleep inside after a long day at the park. Noah was supposed to pick him up in half an hour. "Son, I need to talk to you. About Elliot and Rowan." Noah tensed. I saw his shoulders rise as if in a protective stance. "What is it, Dad?" "I'm worried. I think Rowan isn't not treating the boy very well." "She's his mother." Noah's voice grew harsher. "She loves him." "Love comes in actions, Noah. And her actions." I saw the bruises on Elliot's arm. I've heard her yell at him for the slightest misbehavior. "Kids fall, Dad. They bruise all the time. And Rowan sometimes just gets tired. You know how Elliot can be, difficult." "Difficult? He's the quietest kid I know. He's different at home." Noah wouldn't look me in the eye. "He can be very stubborn. Even if he is, that doesn't justify—" "Dad," my son interrupted me, "I appreciate your concern. I do. But this is our family and we'll figure it out on our own. You, you just don't get the big picture. Then explain it to me. Noah shook his head. You're 80 years old and alone. I understand that you're worried, but please stay out of my relationship with Rowan. It's not what you think it is. I've seen how she feels about Elliot. I'm not a senile old man, Noah. I didn't say that, he sighed. Look, Dad, times have changed. Parenting methods have changed too. What seems harsh to you is just a modern approach. Rowan has read tons of parenting books. Parenting books don't teach you to leave a kid alone in a locked car, I countered. Noah's face turned stone. It was a one-time thing. She just forgot. Who doesn't? She felt awful afterward. She forgets to pick him up from school. She yells at him for acting like a child. She... Stop it, Noah's voice shook. Just stop, Dad. I'm not going to listen to this. You've always been against Rowan, from the beginning. Nothing she does has ever been good enough for you. It's not about Rowan, it's about Elliot. It's always about Rowan. Noah was almost shouting now. You've never given her a chance. You've been prejudiced against her since day one. And now you're trying to smear her as a mother because you can't accept that I chose her. I looked at my son, not recognizing him. This was not the gentle, kind boy I had raised. This was a scared, cornered man, defending himself against a truth he couldn't or wouldn't see. Noah, I just want Elliot to be okay. He's fine. And if you keep this up, I'm going to stop bringing him to you. That was a low blow. Noah knew that Elliot was the only joy in my life since Elizabeth died. You wouldn't do that, I said quietly. I'll do what I have to do to protect my family. Even from you, Dad. After that conversation, we only communicated about Elliot's visits. Strictly, formally. Noah didn't come over for tea anymore. Just waited in the car while I packed up my grandson's things. That's when I realized that talking wasn't going to get me anywhere. I needed a plan. The next day, I called my old friend Arthur Quinn. We'd worked together at the municipality, he in the legal department, me in building inspection. Arthur had specialized in family law before moving into municipal work. We met at Donna's Cafe, away from prying eyes. Arthur looked the same as he had 20 years ago. Only his hair had gone completely gray, and he had a few more wrinkles. What's the matter, Wilfred? Sounds serious, he said after the greeting. I told him everything. About Rowan, about Elliot, about my concerns and observations, about the journal I'd kept, about the pictures of the bruises, about the incidents of neglect. Arthur listened without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, drumming his fingers on the table. It's a lousy situation, Wilfred, he said finally, especially with your son on her side. What can I do? Legally, not much. You're not the child's guardian. You can file a report with Child Protective Services, but unless there's obvious signs of physical abuse, and especially if your son denies it, they have a lot of work to do with obvious cases. Neglect is hard to prove, especially when it's not critical. I felt hope leaving me. So there's nothing I can do? I didn't say that. Arthur leaned closer. You're keeping a journal. That's good. Keep documenting everything. Make copies. Keep them in a safe place. Talk to Elliot's teachers, his pediatrician. Don't accuse directly, just raise concerns. Ask if they've noticed anything unusual. And then wait, Arthur sighed. Wait until something happens that can't be ignored. Something that will warrant immediate intervention. In such cases, there is often one decisive incident. One time when all the lines are crossed. I didn't like that, waiting for something bad to happen to Elliot, but I understood Arthur's logic. And be prepared, he added. Know in advance who to call, what to say. Have a plan of action. That same evening, I began to make a plan. Contacts for Child Protective Services, the police, lawyers specializing in custody. I updated my journal, adding the exact dates and times of all the incidents I could remember. I spoke to Ms. Prim, Elliot's teacher, without going into detail, just expressing concern. She was careful in her expressions, but made it clear that she too had noticed the problems. Elliot is a very quiet boy, Mr. Parkhurst. Sometimes too quiet, and he often looks frightened, especially when his mother comes to pick him up, which it must be said, doesn't happen as often as it should. I added her words to my notes. Then I met with Dr. Hank, Elliot's pediatrician. He was even more guarded, citing doctor-patient confidentiality. But when I mentioned the bruises, his face changed. I can't discuss specific cases, Mr. Parkhurst, but I'm always alert to any signs that might indicate problems in the family. Another diary entry. I contacted Hector Price, a former Child Protective Services worker, now a counselor. He advised me to be prepared to act quickly if the need arose. If you see a child in immediate danger, call the police, not Child Protective Services. The police can act immediately, and then contact me immediately. I bought a new cell phone. Simple, but with a good camera. I set it to automatically save photos to cloud storage so no one could delete them. Gradually, the plan took shape. I hoped I'd never need it, that Rowan would come to his senses, that Noah would see the light, that Elliot would never have to go through the nightmare of destroying his family. But deep down, I knew my hopes were in vain. I'd seen too much in my long life. People don't change that easily. And cracks in the foundation only widen over time if they aren't repaired. All I could do was be ready, and I was ready. The clock on the bedside table was showing 2 in the morning when I woke up to a sound. At first I thought it was part of the dream, a quiet, insistent knocking. But the sound repeated more distinctly, and I realized someone was knocking on my front door. Crime is low in Springfield, but still I cautiously approached the door, turning on the porch light on the way. I looked through the peephole and saw something that made my heart sink. The small figure of Elliot, dressed in pajamas and a thin jacket, standing on the doorstep, shivering with cold. I swung the door open. "Elliot, what are you doing here?" My voice shook as much as the boy in front of me. "Grandpa," he said quietly, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. "Mom kicked me out into the cold." I pulled him inside, closed the door and knelt down, hugging the trembling body. It was a frosty October night. The temperature had dropped below 0, and the boy was wearing only pajama pants, a t-shirt, and a light jacket, not even buttoned up. His little hands were icy cold. "Jesus, Elliot, you're freezing cold. How long have you been outside? How did you get here?" "I walked," he answered, snuggling against me. "I remembered the way. You and I used to go to the park, and then you'd show me where your house was." It was true. We did walk around the neighborhood once, and I showed him the way from the park to my house. But the distance, it's at least a mile. A 6-year-old walked a mile by himself at night in the freezing cold. I carried him into the kitchen, sat him at the table, and turned on the kettle. Elliot sat with his arms wrapped around himself, still shivering. I quickly found a blanket and wrapped him up. "We'll warm you up now, and then you can tell me everything, okay?" He nodded without looking up. I made hot cocoa with marshmallows, his favorite drink, and set the mug in front of him. My hands were shaking almost as much as his. Anger and fear fought inside me, but I tried to speak calmly. "What's wrong, Elliot? Why aren't you at home?" He took a small sip of cocoa before answering. "Mom had a party. There were a lot of people there and loud music. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs and asked her to turn the music down because I had a math test tomorrow." He fell silent again, clutching the mug with his small fingers as if trying to absorb its warmth. "And what did Mom say?" I nudged him gently. "She said that I was interfering with her fun, that I was always ruining everyone's fun. Uncle Brad was there and he said I was a whiner, and they all laughed, and then—" Elliot sighed and I saw his lower lip quiver. "And then Mom said that if I didn't like the music, I could go outside." She took my hand and led me out onto the porch. I thought she was kidding, but she closed the door. I knocked, but no one opened it. The music was too loud. I could feel the rage building inside me. Rowan had put a 6-year-old out in the cold in the middle of the night, a kid in his pajamas, her own son. "Where was Daddy?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Dad's on a business trip," Elliot said quietly. "He left yesterday and will be back in 3 days." "Of course. Noah's on a business trip. Rowan wouldn't dare do such a thing if he was home. Although, given his growing blindness to her actions, maybe she would." "How long were you on the porch?" I don't know. A long time. I was freezing. Then I remembered you lived near the park, so I thought I'd go to your place." "Did I do the right thing, Grandpa?" "Yes, baby. You did the right thing. I hugged him, feeling his little body still shaking from the cold and stress. You're a very brave and smart boy, and you're safe now. I checked his hands and feet for frostbite, but thankfully he hadn't had time to be seriously affected by the cold. Still, I needed to document everything. I pulled out my phone and took some pictures of Elliot sitting at the cocoa table, wrapped in plaid. His pale face, his cheeks and nose reddened from the cold, his hands shaking. Elliot, I need to make some calls, okay? And then we're going to go to the guest room and you're going to bed. You're safe here with me. He nodded, still holding on to the mug of cocoa like it was a lifeline. I walked out into the hallway, holding the phone tightly in my hand. My heart was racing, but my mind was clear. The thing I'd been dreading and waiting for at the same time had finally happened. Irrefutable proof that Rowan was dangerous to Elliot. The first call I made was to Hector Price. Despite the late hour, he answered almost immediately. There was no drowsiness in his voice. It sounded like he hadn't slept either. Wilfred, what's going on? Start the plan, now. I said the code phrase we'd agreed on beforehand. There was a brief pause, then Hector answered. Got it. Is the baby with you? Yes, he came on his own. Walked a mile alone. At night, in a light jacket. He was put outside during the party. Injuries? Any signs of abuse? Just frozen. But he could have gotten severe frostbite. It's -3 outside. Take pictures. Record his story if you can, on a tape recorder. And call the police to document the kid's condition and circumstances. Already took the pictures. I'm calling the police now. I'm calling Child Protective Services. I've got contacts there. They'll send an on-call officer right away. And I'll contact Arthur. We'll need legal support. We finished talking and I immediately dialed the police. I explained the situation to the officer on duty, who promised to send a patrol immediately, and also to check the address where the party had taken place. Finished talking, I went back to the kitchen. Elliot was still sitting at the table, clutching his empty mug. He looked exhausted and scared. Grandpa, I don't want to go back there, he said quietly. And you won't have to, kid. At least not today. Now let me put you to bed. You need to rest. I took him to the guest room, where Elliot sometimes stayed during our long days together. Helped him change into a clean t-shirt. One of mine. It was huge on him, but soft and warm. Tucked him into bed and covered him with 2 blankets. Will you stay with me until I fall asleep? He asked. Sure. I sat down on the edge of the bed and took his hand. Elliot dozed off almost immediately, exhausted from fear and the long drive. I looked at his little face, relaxed in sleep, and felt my heart break with pain and anger. How could anyone do this to a child? To his own son? 20 minutes later, there was a quiet knock on the door. I carefully released my hand from Elliot's fingers and went to open it. A police officer and a middle-aged woman stood on the doorstep with a leather folder in her hands. Mr. Parkhurst? The officer asked. I'm Officer Taylor, and this is Ms. Clark from Child Protective Services. I led them into the kitchen, away from the sleeping Elliot, and told the whole story. Officer Taylor took notes and Ms. Clark asked clarifying questions. Professionally, but with undisguised concern in her eyes. Sorry. We just got back from the address where the party was held, Officer Taylor reported. Indeed, loud music, obvious alcohol consumption. A woman who identified herself as the boy's mother was intoxicated. She claimed the child was sleeping upstairs and became aggressive when we insisted on checking. Surprisingly, when she realized the baby was gone, she began accusing her guests of scaring the baby away, Ms. Clark added. No concern about where he might be at 2 a.m. Just annoyance that the party had been interrupted. I showed them the photographs I'd taken when Elliot first arrived and read out excerpts from my diary of observations over the past few months. You did the right thing, Mr. Parkhurst, Ms. Clark said. In the circumstances, we have grounds to temporarily remove the child from the family to ensure his safety. Given that you are his grandfather and you have arrangements for him to stay with you, he can stay with you if you agree. Of course I agree, I replied. I will do whatever it takes. Tomorrow you will need to come to our office to arrange for temporary custody. In the meantime, we'll make a preliminary report. While Ms. Clark filled out the paperwork, Officer Taylor provided additional details. The neighbors confirmed that music had been playing since 9 o'clock at night. One of them saw a child standing on the porch around midnight, but thought it wasn't long, maybe punished to go out to think about his behavior. When he looked out a half hour later and the child was gone, he assumed he had been taken back into the house. I felt a wave of anger rise in me. A neighbor saw a little boy standing on the porch on a cold night and did nothing? We took his statement, the officer added as if he had read my mind. They'll be in the report. Ms. Clark finished with the paperwork and handed me a copy of the preliminary temporary custody order. Call the child's father in the morning, she said. He needs to know what happened. We're required by law to notify both parents, but it's better if he hears it from you first. I nodded. Talking to Noah would be difficult, but inevitable. What's going to happen to Rowan? I asked. She has been issued a warning for improper parenting, Officer Taylor replied. She's also been issued a citation for disorderly conduct due to noise. But most importantly, an investigation has been opened for child endangerment. That's a serious charge. After they left, I checked on Elliot. He was still asleep, now curled up under the blankets, cradling the teddy bear I'd kept for him in the guest room. His face seemed so serene in his sleep, as if all the fears of the last few hours had dissolved into a deep, childlike dream. I closed the door quietly and went back into the kitchen. I sat at the table, staring at the empty cocoa mug Elliot was clutching so tightly. My phone vibrated, a message from Hector. Arthur's on it. Meet him tomorrow at 10 in his office. Hang in there, old man. The first step has been taken. I glanced at my watch. It was almost 4 in the morning. In a few hours, a new day would begin. A day that would change everything. For me, for Elliot, for Noah, and for Rowan. The plan was set in motion. There was no turning back. At 5:30, as usual, I woke up and went to check on Elliot first thing. He was still asleep, now sprawled starstruck on the bed, having thrown off one of the blankets. I gently adjusted him, trying not to wake him. It was going to be a long day ahead, and he needed rest. I went into the kitchen and started making breakfast. Scrambled eggs and bacon, toast with jam, orange juice, everything Elliot loved. As the bacon sizzled in the pan, I thought about the upcoming conversation with Noah. What would I say to him? How would he react? The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Noah's number. Apparently the police had already contacted him. Dad? His voice sounded tense. What the hell is going on? I got a call from the police. Something about Elliot and Rowan. Noah, I tried to keep my voice calm. I have Elliot. He came in last night alone. Rowan put him out on the street during the party. What? There must be some mistake. Rowan would never... Listen to me, son, I interrupted. Your 6-year-old walked a mile alone at night in sub-zero temperatures because his mother kicked him out the door. That's not a mistake. It's a fact. Both the police and Child Protective Services were already here. Elliot's staying with me on a Protective Services decision. There was a long pause. I could almost see Noah trying to make sense of the information as he searched for a way to justify Rowan. I'm on the next flight out, he said finally. Be home, Dad. Eat. Take care of Elliot. Always, I said. When the conversation ended, I heard soft footsteps behind me. Elliot was standing in the kitchen doorway, still in my oversized t-shirt, hair mussed up after his nap. Good morning, Grandpa, he said quietly. Good morning, baby. Hungry? He nodded and climbed into a chair by the kitchen table. I put a plate of breakfast and a glass of juice in front of him. He began to eat slowly and thoughtfully. Do I have to go to school today? He asked between bites of bacon. No, you're staying with me today. We have a lot of important things to do. Is Mom coming to get me? I sat down next to him, looking into his serious eyes, Elizabeth's eyes. No, Elliot, you're staying with me tonight, and tomorrow too. Papa will be here soon, and we'll talk it over. But I promise you, you will never stand alone in the cold again. He nodded as if it were the most natural promise in the world. And then he went back to his breakfast, devouring his scrambled eggs in small, careful bites. I watched him and thought about what Miss Clark had said before she left. Children are remarkably resilient, Mr. Parkhurst. With the right support, they can overcome a lot. With the right support, I was determined to be that support for Elliot, no matter what it cost me. The plan had been set in motion, and now we had to go through all of its steps. The formalization of custody, the investigation, possibly a trial. It wasn't going to be easy, but looking at Elliot calmly eating breakfast at my table, I knew it would be worth it. Noah arrived the next day around 3 in the afternoon. I heard his car pull up in the driveway and stepped out onto the porch. Elliot was taking an afternoon nap at this time. The night's adventure and emotional strain had exhausted him. His son looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled. He'd obviously gotten ready in a hurry. He came up the steps and we looked at each other in silence. "Where is he?" Noah was the first thing he asked. "Sleeping in the guest room. Better not wake him up. He needs his rest." Noah nodded and made his way into the house. I closed the door behind him and led him into the kitchen, the same place where 6-year-old Elliot had held a mug of cocoa with trembling hands a few hours ago after his nighttime journey. "Tell me everything," Noah said, sinking heavily into a chair. "The police reported only the basics. Rowan says," he stammered. Rowan says, "Rowan says it's not what it looks like." "Of course she says that." I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. What does she think things are the way they are?" Noah rubbed his face with his hands. "She claims that she sent him to his room for misbehavior, and he decided to leave on his own. Opened the door and left before she could see. Says she was in a panic when she discovered he was missing." "When did she find him?" "After the police arrived at her party around 3 in the morning." Noah sighed. "Dad, I don't know what happened. I was in Seattle at a conference. I know where you were. Elliot knew too. Your wife, on the other hand, seems to have decided to throw a party as soon as you left. I got up and brought the folder I kept ready. In it were the printed photos of Elliot from that night, a copy of the preliminary report from Child Protective Services, and the police report. Here's what happened, Noah. Your son came to me around 2 in the morning. He walked a mile alone in the freezing cold, wearing pajamas and a thin jacket. He said his mom put him outside because he was in the way of having fun. I took these pictures right after he came in. Look how red his cheeks and nose were from the cold. Look how he was shivering, even wrapped in plaid." Noah slowly went through the photos and I could see his expression change from disbelief to horror. The police confirmed that there had indeed been a party at the house. Rowan was drunk. When they asked about Elliot, she said he was sleeping upstairs. When it turned out he wasn't there, she showed no concern, only annoyance that the party had been interrupted. Noah looked up at me. It's terrible if that's what happened. If. I felt anger rising in me. Do you still have doubts? Do you think I'm lying? Or the police are lying? Or maybe your 6-year-old son made the whole thing up and decided to take a walk in the cold at night for fun? No, Dad, that's not what I meant. Noah shook his head. It's just complicated. I haven't been there. I don't know. You don't know what? Is Rowan capable of this? Then let me tell you something. I took out my observation journal and put it in front of him. For the last 6 months, I'd been writing down every instance of Rowan's neglect of Elliot that I'd seen or been told about. Bruises from grabbing him too hard, incidents of her forgetting to pick him up from school, when she left him alone in the car in the parking lot, when she yelled at him for normal childish behavior. This is not an isolated incident, Noah. It's part of a pattern. Noah flipped through the pages of his journal, and his face grew increasingly pale. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. "I tried, many times. You didn't want to listen. You were always defending her, always making excuses. She's tired. She's going through a rough patch. You're prejudiced against her. Remember the last time we talked about this? You threatened to forbid me from seeing Elliot if I continued to smear Rowan." Noah covered his face with his hands. I didn't believe it was that serious. And now? Do you believe it now?" Noah didn't answer. At that moment, we heard footsteps, and Elliot appeared in the kitchen doorway, sleepy and disheveled from his afternoon nap. "Dad?" His voice was quiet, uncertain. Noah jumped up from his chair and knelt down, opening his arms. Elliot rushed to him, wrapping his arms around his neck. "Hey, champ!" Noah's voice shook. "Sonum, how are you doing?" "Good," Elliot replied. "Grandpa let me sleep in the guest room, and we had pancakes for breakfast." "That's great." Noah pulled his son tighter against him, and I saw his shoulders shake. He was crying. "Daddy, are you crying?" Elliot pulled away, looking at his father worriedly. A little, Noah tried to smile. Sometimes grown-ups cry too when they're sad or when they love someone very much. Do you love me? Elliot asked seriously. More than anything, Noah answered, and I heard a sincerity in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. I left the two of them alone in the kitchen and went into the living room, giving them time to talk. Through the window, I saw another car pull up. Rowan got out of it, and even from a distance, I could see that she was furious. She didn't go to the door, but remained standing by her car, furiously typing something into her phone. A minute later, Noah's phone rang. He came out into the living room, still holding Elliot's hand. It's her, he said, looking at the screen. She's outside. I know, I answered. I saw it from the window. Noah answered the phone, and even from across the room, I could hear Rowan's furious voice. He listened in silence, then said, I'll be right out. No, Elliot's staying here. No, Rowan. I said no. He ended the call and looked at me. I need to talk to her. Will you look after Elliot? Sure. When Noah came out, Elliot climbed onto the couch next to me. Is Mom mad? He asked. Yeah, baby, she's mad. I didn't see the point in lying to him. Is she going to take me home? No, I said firmly. At least not today. Remember those people who came by last night? The policeman and the woman with the papers? They decided that you would stay with me for the time being. Is that okay with you? Elliot nodded, clearly relaxed. I love staying with you, Grandpa. Through the window, I could see Noah and Rowan arguing fiercely outside her car. She was waving her arms, pointing her finger at his chest. He stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head in response to her tirades. Suddenly, she tried to get around him and head toward the house, but Noah blocked her path. She yelled something, pointing at my house, then grabbed his sleeve, but he shook off her hand. This only seemed to increase her fury. She swung around to punch him in the face, but he intercepted her hand. I saw Noah's face freeze. Something changed in his eyes. He let go of her hand and said something that made her go pale, then pointed to her car. After a moment's silence, as she turned around, got in her car and drove off, tires squealing. Noah went back into the house. His face was pale but determined. What did you say to her? I asked. The truth, he answered, that she wouldn't see Elliot until after the Child Protective Services investigation, and that if she tried to enter the house or take him without permission, I would call the police myself. He sank down on the couch next to Elliot and put his arm around his shoulders. So, Dad, did you and Mom have a fight? Elliot asked. Yes, son. Mom and I are going through a rough patch right now, but it's not your fault, you know? Never your fault. Did she yell at you like she yelled at me? That simple question seemed to break through the last wall of denial in Noah. His face contorted in pain. She yells at you a lot, doesn't she? Elliot nodded. When she has a headache, or when her friends come over, or when I ask too many questions, or when I do something wrong. What do you mean, wrong? Noah asked softly. When I spill juice, or when I take a long time to get dressed, or when I cry. Boys aren't supposed to cry, she said. I watched Noah's face grow more shocked with every word Elliot said. It was as if he was just now seeing the full picture of what had happened in his house when he wasn't around. Elliot, he said at last, everyone can cry. Boys and girls and even daddies, as you saw, and no one should yell at you for making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. That night, Noah stayed with me. We put Elliot to bed by reading him 2 stories instead of the usual one. Then we sat in the living room with a bottle of whiskey I kept for special occasions. I was blind, Noah said after the second glass. I just didn't want to see. Love often blinds you, I replied, not wanting to add to his guilt. It's not about love, he shook his head. It wasn't just about it. I was afraid of being alone, afraid I wouldn't be able to handle Elliot on my own, afraid of the scandals and the scenes Rowan would make at any hint of criticism. So I turned a blind eye to the way she treated my son. He covered his face with his hands. What kind of father am I? Ichiu, one who can make things right, I said firmly. You're here. You believed. You chose Elliot over Rowan. That's important, son. The next morning, Noah went to the Child Protective Services office to do the paperwork. While he was there, I got a call from Dorothy Weens, my former neighbor, who was now working at Elliot's school as a third-grade teacher. Wilfred, I heard what happened, she said. Sonam, the whole faculty is talking about it. Ms. Prim is talking to Protective Services right now. Did you talk to them too? I asked. Not yet, but I'm going to. I have some information that may be important. What kind of information, Dorothy? She paused as if gathering her thoughts. I've seen Rowan talking to Elliot after school more than once. Once I heard her call him stupid because he couldn't find his jacket in the locker room right away. Another time, she rudely dragged him by the arm across the parking lot when he just wanted to show her a drawing he'd done in class. And Ms. Prim told me that Rowan never once showed up for parent-teacher conferences, always sending Noah off alone. Are you prepared to testify on the record? Of course I am. I've already made an appointment for tomorrow. All the teachers are willing to help. We've been worried about Elliot for a long time, but without a concrete incident, our hands were tied. After talking to Dorothy, I felt strangely relieved. The evidence was piling up. Elliot's story would not go unnoticed. Noah returned around noon with the official temporary custody papers. They granted me joint custody with you, he said. Sir, Elliot can stay with you while the investigation is going on, but I can see him anytime. Rowan is forbidden any contact without a Protective Services representative present. How are you feeling? I asked, seeing his haggard face. It's like waking up from a nightmare and discovering that reality is even worse, he smiled weakly. But I'll get through this. For Elliot's sake. I got a call from Dorothy Vince. Remember her? She works at Elliot's school. The teacher with the red hair? Yeah, I remember her. She and the other teachers are willing to testify about Rowan's behavior. Noah nodded. The social worker mentioned it. They're gathering evidence from various sources. They've already interviewed our neighbors. He was quiet for a moment, then added, the Child Protective Services attorney said the case will probably go to trial. Rowan has already hired her own lawyer and claims the allegations are false. Are you willing to testify against her? I asked bluntly. Noah met my gaze without hesitation. Yes. For Elliot's sake, yes. I should have done this a long time ago. A week after the incident, we received official notice of a parental rights trial. The date was set a month later. In that time, Child Protective Services had to complete their investigation and submit an official report. Elliot was slowly getting used to the new routine. He was staying with me in the room that Noah and I had rearranged, adding dinosaur posters and a new bookshelf. Noah came over every day after work and spent time with him until dinner. On weekends, they would go to the park or to the movies. I noticed that Elliot became more open, smiling and laughing more often, especially with Noah, who seemed to be rediscovering his son, spending one-on-one time with him without the shadow of Rowan between them. One night when Elliot was already asleep, Noah said to me, you know, I didn't realize how much I was missing, how little I really knew my son. I let Rowan come between us. It's not too late to make things right, I replied. You can see him reaching out to you. Yes, Noah smiled. And I'll never let him down again. No matter what happens in court, no matter what Rowan says or does, Elliot will always come first. I looked at my son and saw in him a new determination, a new strength. Perhaps this crisis, as painful as it was exactly what our family needed. A shakeup that broke old, unhealthy patterns and allowed for a fresh start. There was a trial ahead, and I knew Rowan wouldn't give up without a fight. But now Elliot had not only me defending him, but his father as well. And together, we were stronger than she was. The day of the trial was overcast. Heavy clouds hung over Springfield, as if nature itself reflected the tension of the moment. I awoke before dawn, though the trial was not scheduled until 10 o'clock in the morning. The habit of waking early never fails me, even on days like this. Elliot was asleep in his room. Over the past month, it had truly become his room, not just a guest bedroom. The shelves of books and toys, the world map on the wall, the homemade dinosaur models he and Noah had glued together last week. The boy gradually blossomed into an atmosphere of stability and calm. His nightmares became less frequent, he smiled more, asked more questions. He was becoming himself, a curious, intelligent child who didn't need to fear anger for every unnecessary word. Noah arrived around 8 in the morning, dressed in the strict suit he usually wore to important client meetings. His face was serious, determined. He had changed over the past month. There was a hardness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. The therapy he'd started attending on the advice of Child Protective Services was helping him sort through the complex web of codependency that his relationship with Rowan had pulled him into. "How are you feeling?" I asked, pouring him a coffee. "Nervous," he answered honestly. "But I'm ready. Had a long talk with Arthur yesterday. He says our position is strong. Arthur Quinn, my old friend and an experienced lawyer, has taken to representing our interests in court. At 67, he's no longer actively practicing, but he's back in business for me and Elliot." "And how's Elliot?" Noah asked. "He's still asleep. Ms. Prim will take him to school and stay with him for the rest of the session." I explained to him that it was an important day, but that he didn't need to worry and didn't need to be in court. "Good," Noah nodded. "He doesn't have to go through that." We ate breakfast in silence, both of us immersed in our own thoughts. At 9:30, Ms. Prim, Elliot's teacher, arrived. She agreed to drive him to school so that Noah and I could go straight to court. "Good luck to you both," she said goodbye. "I'll call as soon as the hearing is over to find out the results." The Springfield County Courthouse, austere and stately, reminded me of my years as a building inspector and my occasional testimony in construction disputes. But never before had I been involved in a case that was so personally important to me. In the hallway outside the courtroom, we met Arthur. Gray-haired in an impeccable suit, he looked imposing. With him was a middle-aged woman with a binder of papers, a Child Protective Services representative. "Good morning, Wilfred, Noah." Arthur said hello. "This is Ms. Donovan, who will be representing Elliot on behalf of Child Protective Services. She and I have already discussed strategy." Ms. Donovan nodded. "Our report fully supports your position. We recommend that the court award full custody of Elliot to his father and grandfather, with a ban on unaccompanied contact with his mother until she completes anger management and parenting classes." Noah breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you. That means a lot." At that moment, Rowan entered through the main doors, accompanied by a young, cocky-looking attorney. She was dressed strictly and discreetly. Dark blue suit, minimal makeup, hair neatly styled. Nothing like the bright, loud woman I remembered, clearly trying to give the impression of a serious, responsible mother. Our gazes met across the hall, and there was such hatred in her eyes that I involuntarily took a step back. She whispered something to her lawyer, who nodded, and they walked past us without saying hello. "Don't mind them," Arthur said. "It's a typical scare tactic, but in a court of law, it's not evil looks that speak, it's facts and evidence. And we're fine with that." The trial started at 10 o'clock sharp. Judge Eleanor Green, a woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes behind stern glasses, listened carefully to the opening statements of both sides. Rowan's attorney, one Mr. Pemberton, began with an emotional speech about how his client was a loving mother who had been cruelly slandered because of one incident taken out of context. How her father-in-law, having harbored a grudge against her from the beginning of their relationship, took the opportunity to destroy their family. "Your Honor," Pemberton said, "we are dealing with a classic case of familial estrangement. Mr. Parkhurst Sr. never accepted his son's choices and systematically turned him against his legitimate wife, using his grandson as a tool of manipulation." I felt anger boiling up inside me, but outwardly remained calm. Noah beside me tensed, his hands clenched into fists. Then Arthur spoke. Without unnecessary emotion, he stated the facts clearly and methodically. The incident of the night with the child out in the cold, the systematic neglect, testimony from teachers about Rowan's behavior at school, the testimony of neighbors about the screaming and scandals in the house when Noah was away. "Your Honor," Arthur concluded, "what you have before you is not a family quarrel or an intrigue of relatives. What you have before you is a documented, systematic pattern of child neglect that reached its peak on the night that a 6-year-old boy was forced to walk a mile alone in the freezing cold to find shelter. We ask that you take this into consideration and make a judgment that will ensure the safety and well-being of the child." Judge Green nodded and announced that testimony would be heard first, then the parties would speak. The first to be called was Miss Prim, Elliot's teacher. "Elliot is an exceptionally bright boy, but very withdrawn," she said. "During the first few months of the school year, he had little contact with the other children. He often looked tired and said he couldn't sleep because of the noise. Several times, Mrs. Parkhurst forgot to pick him up after school, and we had to call his grandfather. One time I saw her roughly grab Elliot's arm and literally drag him to the car when he just wanted to show her a drawing he had done in class. He stopped drawing after that incident for a few weeks. After Ms. Prim, Dorothy Weens spoke, recounting incidents where she had seen Rowan yell at Elliot in the school parking lot. Then a neighbor, the same one who saw Elliot on the porch the night of the incident, but took no action. He looked embarrassed and guilty. I thought it wouldn't take long, he excused himself. I know Mrs. Parkhurst often has parties when her husband is away. Sometimes I hear shouting, but I try not to interfere in the family affairs of the neighbors. After the interval, it was the turn of the principal parties. I was the first to speak, detailing my observations over the past months, my diary keeping, my consultations with lawyers and social services. I showed pictures of the bruises on Elliot's arms, pictures taken the night he came to see me. I didn't want to interfere with my son's family, I concluded. I tried to talk to him, to point out the problem. But when I saw my grandson on my doorstep at 2 in the morning, shivering with cold and fear, I realized I could no longer stay away. This was no longer a family relationship issue. It was a child safety issue. When I had finished, Pemberton began his cross-examination. Mr. Parkhurst, do you think that your negative attitude towards your sister-in-law may have influenced your interpretation of events? My attitude toward Rowan was not formed from nothing, I replied. It was based on observations of her behavior. I wasn't interpreting events, I was documenting facts. But isn't it a fact that you were against your son's relationship with Mrs. Parkhurst from the beginning? I was concerned about certain aspects of her behavior, yes, but I supported my son's choices and never tried to interfere in their marriage until I saw that Elliot was in danger. After me, Noah was called to the witness stand. He looked nervous but determined, told me of his gradual realization of the problem, of how long he had denied the obvious signs. I didn't want to see the truth, he confessed. I was afraid of losing my family, afraid of being alone, and because of that fear, I turned a blind eye to the way Rowan treated our son. I convinced myself that she was just a strict mom, that she was going through a rough patch, that it was temporary. But after that incident when Elliot came to his grandfather's house in the middle of the night, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Mr. Parkhurst, don't you think you've changed your mind about your wife too easily? A month ago, you were defending her, and today you're opposing her in court. Have you not succumbed to your father's influence? Noah straightened. I haven't changed my mind. I've opened my eyes to a truth I've ignored for too long, and it's not my father's influence. It's the influence of my son, who finally started smiling and speaking freely once he was in a safe environment. It's the influence of professionals, the therapists and social workers, who helped me see the unhealthy patterns in our relationship with Rowan. Finally, it was Rowan's own turn. She came to the witness stand looking both confident and a little vulnerable, the perfect image of the wrongly accused mother. I love my son, she began. Yes, I'm not a perfect mother. Sometimes I get tired, sometimes I get annoyed. But what mother doesn't get tired? I did have a little get-together with friends that night. Noah was on a business trip, and I was lonely. Elliot was supposed to be asleep, but he came downstairs and started getting cranky. I sent him back to his room, not outside as my father-in-law claims. Elliot apparently decided to go off on his own. He's always been a willful child. She paused as if holding back tears. When I discovered he wasn't in his room, I panicked. But before I could do anything, the police arrived. And then they told me he was at his grandfather's and wouldn't even let me see him. It's not fair. I'm his mother. Arthur began to cross-examine. Mrs. Parkhurst, you claim you sent your son to his room, not outside. But the police report indicates that you didn't know where your son was at first at all. You told the officers he was sleeping upstairs, and only after checking the room did you admit he was missing. How do you explain this contradiction? Rowan stammered. I was sure he was in his room. Maybe I misspoke when I talked to the police. I was upset. How do you explain the fact that Elliot was wearing pajamas and a thin jacket? If he'd decided to leave home on his own, wouldn't it be logical to assume he'd have dressed warmer? He's not a very practical child, Rowan shrugged. And then, the jacket was warm enough for a short walk. For a mile-long walk in the freezing cold? Arthur raised an eyebrow. And how do you explain the teacher's testimony about your neglect of your son? How do you explain the occasions when you forgot to pick him up from school? With each question, Rowan grew more and more tense. Her confidence melted, giving way to irritation. Teachers exaggerate. I had things to do. I couldn't always be on time. And as for how I talk to Elliot, he's a very sensitive boy. He takes everything too personally. Sometimes I have to be tougher on him to make him grow up to be a normal man, not a mama's boy. So you think it's okay to yell at a 6-year-old and leave him alone in a locked car in a supermarket parking lot? Rowan became visibly angry. It happened once. I just popped in for 5 minutes to get cigarettes. Nothing happened to him. What about the time you left him home alone all day to go to the spa with your girlfriends? He's old enough to be left alone for long periods of time, and I called him every hour. Arthur continued his methodical questioning, citing more and more facts about Rowan's neglect of her son. With each question, her composure cracked more and more until it finally broke. "Yes, I do snap sometimes," she exclaimed, raising her voice. "Try sitting with that child 24 hours a day. He is always so perfect with Grandpa and Daddy, and with me, constant whims, questions, whining. I'm tired. I need a life too." "Mrs. Parkhurst," Judge Green's voice was cold and harsh, "I ask you to restrain yourself in my courtroom." But Rowan couldn't stop herself. "They're conspiring against me. They've always been against me. The old man never accepted me, and now he's turned Noah against me too. He has taken everything from me, my husband, my son, my family." Her voice shook with rage, her face flushed. This was no longer the demure, dignified woman who had stood before the court at the beginning of the trial. This was the real Rowan, angry, selfish, thinking only of herself. Judge Green called a recess, and Pemberton literally dragged his client away from the witness stand. Arthur approached us. "She buried herself," he said quietly. Such a display of uncontrollable anger in a courtroom is practically a confession. Judge Green is known for prioritizing the interests of children in family matters. After such a spectacle, there is no way she will allow Rowan unaccompanied contact with Elliot. After a break, a Child Protective Services representative spoke with her recommendations. Then attorneys for both sides presented closing arguments. Pemberton tried to minimize the damage of Rowan's disruption by calling it the emotional reaction of a mother deprived of her child, but it was obvious that his arguments did not convince the judge. After all the speeches, Judge Green removed herself to make her decision. We waited in the hallway. Rowan sat on the far bench, crying quietly on the shoulder of her friend who had come to support her. Noah looked at her with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Son, I really loved her once," he said quietly to me, "or thought I did. Now I don't even recognize her." "People show their true colors in crisis situations," I replied, "and sometimes that face is very different from the mask they wear in normal life." 45 minutes later, we were called back into the courtroom. Judge Green looked serious and determined. Having considered all the evidence presented and heard the testimony, "The court comes to the following decision," she began. "Full custody of the minor Elliot Parkhurst is awarded to his father, Noah Parkhurst, and his grandfather, Wilfred Parkhurst, jointly. Rowan Parkhurst forfeits the right to unaccompanied contact with the child until she completes a full anger management and parenting classes, which must be verified by appropriate certifications." She paused, then continued. "In addition, the court orders Rowan Parkhurst to pay child support as ordered. The judgment is temporary for a period of 6 months, after which time a second hearing will be held to assess progress and possibly revise the terms. The meeting is declared adjourned." The bang of the judge's gavel put an end to this chapter of our lives. I felt both relief and deep sadness. For Elliot, who had to go through all of this. For Noah, whose marriage had crumbled. Even for Rowan, who had lost everything to her own demons. But a sense of relief prevailed. Elliot was safe. He could stay with us, in a home where he was loved and respected. And now he had a chance at a normal, happy childhood. As we walked out of the courtroom, Noah squeezed my hand tightly. "Thanks, Dad, for everything. For being there for Elliot when I couldn't. For opening my eyes even when I resisted. We'll make it through this now, won't we?" I nodded. "Of course we can handle it. Together." And I knew it was true. Whatever difficulties lay ahead of us, we get through them for Elliot. Together. At 77, I didn't expect my life to change so dramatically. Since Elizabeth's death, I had grown accustomed to quiet days filled with reading, working in the garden, and long walks in the neighborhood. I had adapted to solitude, to its rhythm and silence. Now my house was filled with the sound of children's voices, the stomping of little feet, and the constant why. The first weeks after the trial were the hardest. Elliot was still wary, as if he was afraid his new world might collapse at any moment. He often woke up at night with nightmares, screaming and crying in his sleep. I would wake up with him, sitting beside him, holding his trembling little hand in mine until he calmed down and fell asleep again. I dreamed that I was outside again, alone and very cold, he whispered to me one night, and no one opens the door. What do you, Barb? It's only a dream, I said, stroking his head. You'll never be alone outside again. I promise. Gradually, the nightmares became less frequent. We established a routine. Breakfast together, then I'd drive him to school, pick him up in the afternoon, and we'd go to the park or the library. In the evenings, Noah would come over after work and spend time with my son, helping with homework, playing, reading books before bed. My role as a caregiver required some adaptations. I bought a smartphone of the latest model, learned how to use parenting apps to communicate with the school, and mastered online grocery ordering. Figured out modern children's literature so I could pick out interesting books for Elliot. I started cooking more varied meals. It turned out that in all my years of living alone, my culinary repertoire had dwindled to a few simple dishes. Sometimes my body reminded me of my age. My knees were aching after a particularly active day. My back ached longer than usual in the mornings. But I noticed something else too. I was more alert, more energetic. It was as if having a child in the house rejuvenated me. You look younger, Dad, Noah said to me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching Elliot play with the new radio-controlled helicopter in the yard. I feel younger, I admitted. Sure, when there's purpose and meaning, age doesn't feel as much. Noah nodded. You know, I finally filed for divorce. I wasn't surprised. After the trial, Rowan moved in with her friend. Noah stayed in their house, but spent almost all of his free time at my place with Elliot. How are you feeling? I asked. It's strange. He looked at his son thoughtfully. Not so long ago, I couldn't imagine life without Rowan. And now I just want it to be over as soon as possible. Is she contesting the divorce? No, surprisingly. She's agreed to all the terms. I think, he paused. I think she's also realized that our marriage was a mistake. She's not cut out for family life and motherhood. Maybe she's even relieved now. In a way, I understood Rowan. I didn't condone what she'd done. I could never forgive the way she treated Elliot, but understood that she was trapped in a life that wasn't right for her. Some people aren't cut out to be parents. The problem is that they often realize it too late, when they already have a child who is suffering from their inability to love and care. Rowan attended her first 2 meetings with a social worker and 1 anger management session. Then she just stopped coming. 3 months after the trial, she completely disappeared from Springfield, stopped answering her cell phone, vacated her friend's apartment without leaving an address. We found out about it by accident when we got a call from the bank about overdue payments on a credit card registered to both spouses. It turned out that Rowan had left behind a trail of debts, unpaid bills, loans, rent arrears. I'll take care of it, Noah said, reviewing the paperwork sent from the bank. The main thing is that she won't bother Elliot again. At that moment, I realized that my son had really grown up. Not when he got married or became a father, but now, when he took full responsibility for his life and the life of his child. His relationship with Elliot was changing too. Before, Noah had always been the good cop, the one who brought gifts, allowed him to stay up late and eat sweets before dinner. Rowan was left with the role of the strict disciplinarian parent. Now Noah had to find the balance of being both loving and strict, fun and responsible. It's hard, he confided to me one day. The easiest thing is to just indulge him in everything, especially after all he's been through. But I know that won't be helpful in the long run. You're doing great, I assured him. And remember, you're not alone. I'm always here for you. Our relationship with Noah had changed too. The old tensions melted away, giving way to a new understanding. We became a team, 2 generations of men united in caring for the 3rd youngest. I watched Noah watching me and Elliot, as if he were getting to know his father all over again. And I noticed traits in him that I hadn't seen or appreciated enough before. His patience, his deep capacity for love, his unyielding loyalty to his son. As the months passed, Elliot revealed more and more, and his teacher, Ms. Prim, informed us that he began to become more involved in class discussions, making a few friends. He started a science club at the local museum, discovering a special interest in dinosaurs and ancient history. "You wouldn't believe how much he's changed," she said at a parent-teacher conference. "It's like he's blossoming in front of my eyes. I've seen that change every day." His smile grew wider, his laughter louder. He flinched less often at sudden noises, less afraid of making a mistake or spilling something. But there were still moments when the past made itself felt. One time I accidentally dropped a pot in the kitchen, and it hit the floor with a loud clang. Elliot, who was playing in the next room, suddenly froze, his face contorted with fear. "Is everything all right, Grandpa?" he asked quietly. "Yes, I just dropped the pot. It's nothing." He nodded, but I noticed his little fingers trembling as he clutched the toy dinosaur. "You're not mad, are you?" he whispered. At that moment, my heart broke. How many times had he heard something fall, followed by screams and punishments? How many times had he cowered in fear, waiting for a flash of anger? "No, buddy." I walked over and sat down next to him. "I'm not angry. It was just an accident. Everyone drops things sometimes." He nodded cautiously, still not fully convinced. I hugged him gently. "You know I would never yell at you for accidents or mistakes, right?" "I know," he answered after a pause. "And Daddy won't either. But sometimes I forget and get scared." "That's okay. As time goes on, you'll get less and less scared." And indeed, as time went on, those moments became fewer and fewer. The pediatric therapist we took Elliot to once a week said his recovery was going very well. "Children are remarkably resilient," Dr. Freeman explained, "especially when they are surrounded by a stable, supportive environment. Elliot is making great progress. Sure, he still has some trauma to work through, but the foundation for healthy emotional development has already been laid." Noah has decided not to sell their family home, but instead to renovate there, completely changing the interior. "There are too many bad memories associated with the way the house used to look," he explained to me, "both for Elliot and for me. I want it to be a fresh start in a new space when we go back there." While the renovations were going on, they stayed with me. I enjoyed every day with them, but realized it was temporary. Elliot and Noah needed to build their lives, their relationship as father and son. My role was important, but supportive. It had been a year since that cold October evening when Elliot knocked on my door. We celebrated it not as the anniversary of an injury, but as the beginning of a new chapter. A small backyard party, a barbecue, a few close friends, a cake that said, "Here's to new beginnings." Elliot, now 7 years old, was running around with the other kids playing tag. His laughter rang in the evening air, and I thought about how far we'd all come this year. Noah came over to me, holding out a glass of lemonade. "What are you thinking about, Dad?" "About time," and I answered. "About how quickly things change. A year ago, we couldn't imagine where we'd be today." He nodded, looking at his son playing. "The renovations are almost done. I think we'll be able to move in a couple weeks." "I'm going to miss you," I admitted. "We'll come every weekend," Noah smiled. "And you can always stay with us whenever you want. Your room is already ready." I was touched. The thought that Noah's new home had a place set aside for me was heartwarming. "One more thing," Noah continued, a little nervous. "I've started seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, just getting to know each other. But I wanted you to know." "That's great," I said sincerely. "You deserve to be happy, son. She's an elementary teacher at another school. She's very kind. And I'm very careful this time, especially because of Elliot. I know you will be. You've learned a lot." We both looked at Elliot, who was now standing in the center of the circle of kids, telling them something with animated gestures. "Probably some fact about dinosaurs is his latest hobby. He looks so happy," Noah said quietly. "He is happy," I replied. "Thanks to you. Thanks to both of us." Later that night, when the guests had gone and Noah and Elliot had gone to bed, I sat on the veranda, watching the stars, reflecting on the past year, the hardships and joys, the losses and gains. At 77, I became a caregiver. I learned how to use a smartphone, make French toast, and understand modern cartoons. I found the strength to fight the system, to stand up to injustice, to protect those I love. Elizabeth would be proud of me, I was sure. She always said that family is the most important thing we have, and that protecting your family was not a matter of choice, but of necessity. I once thought my life was almost over, that there were only quiet days ahead, in a chair with a book, slowly fading away, waiting for the end. Now I knew that wasn't the case. There were days ahead full of laughter and noise, days when I would be needed, days when I would love and be loved in return. Age is no barrier to starting over, not a hindrance to love, to struggle, to live. Sometimes you just have to open the door when there's a knock on it in the middle of the night and be ready for a whole new future waiting behind it. Elliot and Noah gave me that second chance, a new beginning at the end of the road, and I was determined to live this new chapter fully, with an open heart and no regrets. Because in the end, it doesn't matter how old you are. It only matters if you have the courage to do what's right when it's most needed. I did, and I will never regret it. Regret.